as I observe, the bilateral relationship is in the track of re-stabilization. This is my general characterization of the current status of bilateral relationship between China and Australia. This re-stabilization process is reflected by multiple dimensions. First, the quite stable resumption of bilateral engagement. We have seen various lines of governmental communications restored between Beijing and Canberra. Second, we have seen the steady renormalization process of economic and trade ties between two sides, particularly in agricultural, raw material sectors. Thirdly, we also have seen a mutual recommitments by both governments to deal with the differences and the disputes of interest between each other through constructive and professional ways. And the upcoming visit of Prime Minister Albanese to China will be both, as I observe, will be both the result of this positive momentum and the further commitment to this restabilizing process. My assessment is, despite of the momentum of this round of restabilizing momentum injected by both governments in Beijing and Canberra, in the foreseeable future, under the Albanese and the Labour Party's government, a couple of structural and systematic factors have deeply rooted and worked together to keep this relationship in a sort of a stable but low-level status. This is my general assessment. The first and most critical factor is the fundamental shift in the perception by Australian government, including many Australian elites, about China's rise and its implications on Australia. The Labour Party government, despite of its more professional and pragmatic way of China policy, have largely inherited the narratives or the perception by its predecessors, believing that challenges of China's rising outweighed its opportunities. Particularly in regional security terms, Canberra still perceived China as a threat rather than a partner. Therefore, Australia will further its military and security alliance with America to deter the so-called China's security threats. So this shift of perception in Canberra has its structural impact on bilateral relationship. And this is also, as I observe, is the biggest political obstacle of trust building between Beijing and Canberra in the long term, and will prevent bilateral relationship from upgrading to a higher level. The second important factor is in its economic field. Despite of a steady improvement on the trade relations, particularly in agricultural, raw materials, and tourism, as we have seen ever since Albanese government came to power, there's no progress on the higher technological high-tech sector. And more significantly, Canberra's lukewarm and ambiguous attitudes towards Beijing's initiative to join the CPTPP has also made Beijing very suspicious about Canberra's motivation. I think that first thing is we need to have a better management of our expectation. The second one, as I said, that we should continue to strengthen our bilateral interactions on the various aspects, including business communities interaction, including a more solid, stable, and efficient governmental communications at the various levels, central governments, local governments. Particularly, I think nowadays we should encourage the people-to-people contact, including a more deep, honest communications between the intellectual communities. In the past few years, the students' exchange between two sides has been suspended. I feel that this is a very serious problem for a sustainable development of bilateral relationship. And last but not least is both sides, governmental or governments, business communities, intellectual communities need to think and talk about how the both sides should work together to provide more public goods by addressing a mounting global challenges these days facing both of us, such as climate change, green or energy transition, how to make a good governance of a digital or any other emerging and disruptive technologies to the whole societies of our own as well as to the world. So I think that a very important aspect of how we could see a further how we could see a further momentum that we could inject into the restabilizing process largely depends upon what kind of mindset we will have of both sides. I observe that both in China as well as in Australia, there's still a very strong, solid foundation who believe that the stable and more interactive relationship between two sides is in the interest of both, as well as for the region and the world. But at the same time, we also recognize there are some people who talk about those narrative and the rhetorics of a zero-sum competition, and also talk about talk too much about the securitization of economic relationship, and talk about use those de-risk as a facade for further diversify or for further to decouple of our economic and people-to-people contacts. Beijing, of course, has still attached great importance to the bilateral relationship, and also believe and happy to see that the current momentum injected by both sides, including from Canberra under the Albanese Prime Minister Albanese and the Labour Party government, has already helped stabilize the bilateral relationship. So I think Beijing appreciate and support such kind of a positive momentum. In the meantime, Beijing also watch very closely about some of the specific issues that Canberra would like to take, such as the Canberra's further security and military collaboration with Washington, and what is implication, particularly security implications to Beijing, and how Canberra's response towards Beijing's initiative of further improve or upgrade of our economic and trade relationship, including on the aspects of technological aspects, as well as on Beijing's interests.